Good morning and welcome. It's a wonderful Monday morning. I'm Ayo Makinde.
Well, after that, a beautiful one as well. I'm Kayode Okikiolu.
Energy is everything.
Absolutely.
And the fuel you take into your body is food. I know you know what I'm talking about.
Vehicles are starving these days, right?
They're starving.
Vehicles generate and sets. I mean, it's not just that, it spills over into a lot of things. This is the third or fourth week now of fuel scarcity across the nation, particularly Lagos, the FCT, and some other neighboring states. And I know that this government had been saying that, we've never had fuel scarcity. And if we had, just pockets of nothing major as we had seen in the past. But from what we've seen now, then I think that just trumps all that record in court, because they said it was a bad fuel. I thought that they had quarantined or isolated that, and they're trying to clean it up. Is it supply cuts or whatever it is? Is it removal of subsidy, which they said we're going to keep until what? The proposal is, I think, for 18 months now. What exactly is the challenge? Because it doesn't look like it's a bad fuel. Apparently, perhaps it is something else that we're not being told. But what we know right now is a lot of people have near empty tanks right now. A lot of people have been sleeping at filling stations. A lot of people don't even have fuel, which, by the way, they need for survival. And I don't seem to see that sense of urgency. It is annoying, it is saddening, it is infuriating, and I can go on and on. The point is, it looks like we're being taken for granted.
Well, I hope we're not being taken for granted, Kayode. I sincerely hope not. When I say the energy that people run on and all, you talked about generators and all, but there is no way transportation costs have not increased.
Oh, yes.
There is no way. And I don't, if we are talking about the layman, the man on the streets, these are the people that are most affected, and this is a fact that is not lost on us. So we need some explanation, clearly. we just need to know exactly what is going on. People need to understand, because from, you said 2-3 weeks ago, the last I heard, this whole thing, according to the NNPC, and I think it was the minister or someone speaking to us, said, by last week, this fuel scarcity will be a thing of the past. It's still a thing of the present. So I'm wondering...
And it looks like it'll be a thing of the future at this rate.
And I sincerely hope it's not a thing of the future. Because look at right now, as I said, I don't think they are not unaware. I think everyone is aware of what is happening right now.
No one is coming out to give remember, I will always take this back to COVID, because it showed us how capable we were of moving fast. You saw that there was a presidential task force briefing every day about COVID when it first began, saying this is what's happening, this is what we're doing, and it was a big deal. They will take questions and all that, but now nobody is saying anything literally after the apology and the promise that we're expecting was it 2 billion liters or
more than 2 billion
more than 2 billion, and we have 1 billion liters reserve as usual, as we always hear. There's been almost silence. And first, we don't know how the bad fuel came into being. They're still tossing around. We don't know what's up with the supply, what's happening with the supply chain, the fuel stations that are hoarding or not, or they don't even have, or they're buying at 165 naira. I don't see anybody saying anything. And again, I would say, it looks like we're being taken for granted. I've not bought petrol in 3 weeks. I choose where I go these days.
How have you survived?
I choose where I go these days.
If I don't get fuel in 3 days...
You know when you strategically move, you go to the office and you black out every other thing. If you can't get someone to deliver to you or get...
Wait. Mark, is that your experience as well?
Gosh. I hope we're not having fuel challenges getting to Mark.
Good morning, Nigerians.
Good morning.
Good morning. Go ahead.
Can you hear me now?
Oh, yes, we can hear you loud and clear. Go ahead, we can hear you.
Well, I was saying that if I don't buy petrol in 3 weeks, the chances are very high that I'd have stopped coming to work by now or would have been zooming from the house, as the case might be. As I did explain to you earlier, the distances in Abuja are quite lengthy. For you to move from one part to another, you get there in good time, but, you do spend a lot of fuel. And yes, the fuel queues are back here. They never left, actually. They never left since last week. It looked like they were going. They never did go. they're back in full force. Some filling stations now do not have the product, so they're closed. They're not selling. A lot of filling stations on my way down, I live along Airport Road, from the Airport Road down towards the city center, a lot of them were shut down. They were not working. But some that did have had pretty long queues in front of them. I think what is happening right now is that there is a disagreement about the price. From what I could glean from the conversation we had with Petron last week, it looked like they did have supply, but the people who were supposed to be lifting from the depots were not getting at the price which the NNPC believes they should be getting at, or says they should be getting at. And as a result, they are unable to sell at the price which we are all used to, which is 165. So the chances are very high that if the filling station does have, perhaps it might not be selling at that price. I really do not know. I'm not an NPC. I think that they should come and tell us what is going on. And so, Kayode, I support your motion that there should be a whole PTF for this, because we need updates. Fuel is life. Yeah. Without fuel, you can do almost nothing. So it's extremely important that we understand what is going on. This punishment for how many weeks now is a little too much.
Absolutely.
It's not a little too much, Marco. It's a lot too much. Well, I began by saying that it's energy, right? And energy is about the one you take in and then the one you give into your cars. But then there is energy being supplied to human bodies in South Africa.
And this is meant to inspire people. I'm angry right now, but I just want to douse this with some sort of inspiration. So it's this Nigerian farmers in South Africa. And you know how there's a lot of demand for Nigerian food. If you've ever been out of the country, you know how it feels when after like a few days you want to eat that amala.
You don't even want to understand. Like, I went into a restaurant somewhere and they said it's what's it called, spicy pepper. Oh. It tasted like sugared tomato.
So that's the experience of lots of Nigerians out there. They want that egusi, that okra. And what this, the couple, the Adelikes, I believe what they did was they had to go through a lot of, work, research, trying to find a place appropriate to plant these Nigerian foods like, the ewedus, the bitter leaf, the usual soups, and even yam. You know how hard it is to get yam out of the country. So they did a lot of research. By the way, a lot of people had done this. They had failed, but they didn't let this get to them. And they went ahead, did the research, found a place around Limpopo, and they planted. And there you go. That's the outcome. It's heartwarming to see that, they saw a problem and they tackled it. They love challenges around us these days, and what we do most times is complain about it. But how about we try to find a way to look for solutions, in spite of the fact that people have perhaps failed trying to, solve those problems. The constant about life is there will be challenges, there will be problems, but we have ideas. We're blessed with great ideas, the tenacity, the strength as a Nigerian. We have that special strength as Nigerians to achieve things. So go into this week, be inspired by the Adelikes and solve problems.
Well, if you want to see that report, you definitely have to just stick with us on Channel Television. I'm pretty sure that you're going to see more and more of it just to have the full value of it, because trust me, it is extremely inspiring. And especially in these days where we're talking about urban farming. Urban farming, I saw something like that in Singapore, and I'm like, okay, so it's urban farming now. We can actually grow tomatoes.
Right in your house?
Yes, even in the tall buildings, you can grow tomatoes. Yeah. We could go on and on about that, but let's see. How about we take a look at some of the papers this morning and see what we have on that front page.
I was thinking maybe Mark Ware would want to put in a few words on that, because I know that
you want to go to the market, Mark Ware?
Well, I was actually hoping we would show our viewers some of those pictures, pretty pictures. And I think that, while I was thinking about it, if you listen to the last line that Betsy used, she says, I think September is the next harvest time, that they'll be back to fill their bags and also tell you about how the harvest went, something to that effect. And I said, oh, yes, this is certainly a report done in self-interest and self-interest, and of course, to inspire us. But yes, you can say that again. If we think of the problems, I think that sometimes perhaps we can find the solutions, unless, of course, the solutions are totally out of our control, as the fuel situation right now is. We totally have no control over that. But we've proffered a few solutions, such as, federal government, brief us at every point in time. But it was quite inspiring to see what the couple were doing. They're not just doing growing food, they're also into cosmetics. And I think that, that's a lot of research to not just be growing the things that you eat, but also the things that you can process from that food and get the raw materials directly from your farm. That's certainly a lot of work that has gone into that. And there are things that are possible. I think that we need to ask what sort of environment. Don't forget, they got 3 hectares up north the country, and it is totally irrigated. If we were to get a farm here, for instance, will you be getting an irrigated patch, or will you be wondering how you're going to get your own water as well? So sometimes when federal government says there is land, plenty of land, we agree that there is land, but we've since gone past the era when we have to rely solely on rains for water. What else is the federal government doing apart from saying, or even the state governments, because the lands are strictly within the purview of the states? What else are they doing apart from saying we have land here? Are they offering big expanses of land that have been totally irrigated so that year in, year out, you can grow crops? These are some of the questions that we should ask ourselves. I think that there are certainly lessons that can be learned from the enabling environment to the work that the couple themselves did put in. Gentlemen.
When you talked about the irrigation and all, my mind went to the fact that you have to use, sometimes you have to use generators for the irrigation. And then there's no, I don't want to go there. The papers this morning, and I'll begin with
you went there.
I'll begin with the paper that talks about the fuel price hike, scarcity this morning, and that's the Nigerian News Direct, which speaks to what we have been discussing. Nigerian News Direct begins by talking about fuel scarcity. It says, fuel scarcity, price hike worsens transport fare. That's the lead of the paper this morning. And you have a number of riders. Attendants seek illegal charges from customers. Nigerians lament. Lagos, Abuja, Benin, Oshogbo, Abeokuta, others worse hit. So, Kayode, is not only Lagos and Abuja and environs, even Oshogbo and Benin are worse hit. Deregulation panacea for scarcity, sharp practices in petroleum industry. Former MOMAN chairman says that one, and you find more of that on the front pages of the paper this morning. Several other issues that you will find interesting, but that's the Nigerian News Direct today.
I mean, several issues, absolutely. But take a look at the Daily Times. Also has that fuel crisis right there. But it will interest you to know that that's not the only thing we're contending with as of today. And you say, Kegama to Buhari, intensify action to resolve ASUU strike, fuel crisis. So, just double, what is it? Dual-headed hydra. It doesn't even come right, but clearly we have a lot of challenges we're grappling with. It says government officials must listen to citizens and politicians must listen to people they represent. And part of the things we've talked about is, the government needs to speak to the people. We have asked for some sort of update, briefing, as it were. Tell us what's going on. Answer questions. Let people bring the issues they have trying to get petrol and what you're doing about it. And it's not so much to ask for. We've seen it with COVID, so I think this is very instructive this morning. Government officials must listen to citizens and politicians must listen to the people they represent. Absolutely. And on top of the nameplate, you see Russia-Ukraine crisis. Safety and human rights of Nigerians are priority. Buhari says everyone should be treated with dignity. So there's been a lot of concerns about how Nigerians are treated, especially those trying to cross the border, to get to safety, and even those within the country at this time. It's what you do at this time that would actually linger. That will linger the memories of countries and people. And I think it's important that Ukraine and even Russia, they handle this, very, very well. That's the Daily Times this morning. Marwa.
Well, let's take a look at the Guardian newspapers for you, and they have this fuel scarcity worsens as NNPC fails on demand promises. That's on the front page. Marketers sell above 300 naira per litre. Ipman worst hit as depot owners, Moman operate at loss. Nasima calls government stakeholders to find solutions. So they have pictures of the filling stations, some of them empty and others besieged by people who are looking for petrol. You also have a number of other stories. Air Nigeria to fly before June 2023, says Concession Commission. Well, make of it what you will. I mean, I'm making of it what I will. Air Nigeria to fly before June 2023. 2023 is next year, and it's after elections. Really? Okay, you also find this. Russia-Ukraine war. Putin puts nuclear deterrent on special alert. It's on page 4 of the paper. They also have this back from history picture, which shows current president of Russia, Putin, who stayed in Tanzania for 4 years, training freedom fighters from 1973 to 1977. You might want to pick up a copy of The Guardian to see what the story is about. Let's leave it there for The Guardian.
Well, that dovetails into the leadership, the lead story of the leadership newspaper this morning. Russia-Ukraine war. Anxiety over Nigerian students still trapped at Polish borders. Find the story on page 4. FG asks stranded citizens to move to Romanian-Hungarian borders. Russian military puts nuclear weapons on high alert. Kiev to hold talks with Moscow. The question around that has been where the talks will hold. But that's the lead of the paper this morning.
It could be via one of these video teleconferencing apps. You don't have to be there in person, especially at the time like this. I think it's better you just do some teleconferencing.
I don't know if that'll ever happen. At least not in this case, but I don't know. Maybe others will join virtually, but it's like sometimes you have to judge all.
In person?
In person.
Okay.
Because that virtual thing doesn't sit too. And so many other stories on the front page, but there is this one that should give us attention. Maritime workers to shut down Lagos on a port over local content breach. That story is on page 25, and certainly something governments should pay attention to ASAP. CBN warns as hard times trigger influx of fintech banks. Find the details of that one. It's a very troubling one on the front page of the leadership newspapers, continues on the inside pages.
So I'll be walking you through the front page of the Nigerian Tribune right now, and the lead story is on the Ukrainian situation, especially as it affects Nigerians. You see, FG confirms 4,000 Nigerians stranded in Ukraine, demands their safe passage. I think the figure was put at 12,000 by one of the dailies last week. So apparently we have a figure to it now, 4,000. Putin puts nuclear forces on high alert. That's something we don't want to see right now. Nuclear forces, what? World isolating Russia. Who said that? European countries, US to disconnect Russian banks from international financial system. BP to exit 20% its shareholding from Russian oil firm. So I think that speaks to the world isolating Russia. But how much of this would actually make Russia cave in? We'll see in the coming days, I guess. Page 3 has more details. And let me see. Under that big picture you see on the front page, you see 2023 poll timetable, APC, PDP, SDP, ACF, lawyers express worry, readiness for election. Apparently, INEC released that timetable and it just looked like, we don't have much time. You have to submit the names of a candidate by June. And even for APC, for example, they're still trying to get their acts together regarding the convention. And you wonder how much time do they have right now? Not much, clearly. Speaking of the APC, you see just right under the nameplate, Omo Agege, Malami, Ayade, Sanwo-Olu, Umahi, others lead APC National Convention Subcommittee. But it appears as though the party came out afterwards, after it released that list, to say, well, disregard that list. Perhaps they will need to put out another list for the subcommittees for the convention. So, I mean, we've seen this happen with the date for the zonal convention, and then it came out and said that would be the date for the national convention. I mean, just the same day, again, we're seeing something similar, and it points to... No, you wanted to say something.
I was just wondering, is that saying that this party is not ready?
I mean, so it's,
We've had how many years now to plan for 2023 election?
Oh,
I'm just saying. I thought there should be some standing. Well, maybe I'm not a politician, so I don't know what I'm talking about.
Well, there's a strike ongoing now at the ports, and you see cost of imported vehicles to increase as trapped cargoes accumulate. Charges, the very shocking one. Clearing agents, I hear something on strike. Worrying, I must say. That's the Tribune.
Well, let's take a look at the Abuja Inquirer for you, and they have this. It's focusing on politics. Plan for Jonathan Boone ticket. That will speak at the right time. Attributed to Chidok. I know you've seen other dailies saying that, you know, Sage has said he shouldn't also consider it. So, but perhaps this is maybe leaking letting the cat out of the bag. I don't know, but you might want to see details somewhere inside of the Abuja Inquirer. You also find there former Minister of Aviation in the Jonathan government saying GJ will speak at the right time. When that will be, I don't know, but you might want to flip to page 3 to give you details. Fuel crisis deepens. Petrol sells for 225 naira per litre in Abuja. As I did tell you, I haven't bought in a while, but I mean, the fuel queues are not very pretty. I'm not able to confirm or not confirm this figure, but this is what the Abuja Inquirer has found out for you. It's on page 3 of the paper. How we arrested fleeing killer husband. That's according to the FCT police. We never demanded for 300,000 naira. Come Kuje Forest for kidnappers. It's on page 3 of the paper. You also have a number of other stories at the bottom, which I'll let you do yourself shortly. INEC set new dates for 2023 elections. That's also on the front page. And both Uber drivers, dispatch riders, others to pay taxes. That's according to FCTA. Page 5 will be where you find details. Let's leave it there for the paper.
New Telegraph seems to be speaking the same language with its lead story as the Abuja Inquirer this morning, but perhaps from a different perspective. There you have it. 2023, don't disgrace yourself by joining APC, Sage tells Jonathan. What does that mean? Aren't there choices anymore? Stories on page 2 alleges schemers want ex-president to hand over to Boni after 1 term. This politics thing.
You know, that actually, interestingly, that makes sense in some sense. You know how these things go. But, I mean, please go ahead.
I'm not even going to say anything, as Marco has advised. Just look into the details on the inside pages, page 2 to be precise. And right under the picture on the front page, Constitution Amendment. Reps begin electronic voting Tuesday. After 2 weeks system test run, suspend all committee activities till after exercise. Stories on page 3.
I'm actually looking forward to this one, especially for the constitutional amendment. So we know how everyone voted. In fact, moving forward, we need to know how our reps vote. So we can know whether it's the work that we sent them to do, the assignment we gave them that they indeed submitted at the floor.
I'm also waiting to see, are they going to vote on party lines? Is it going to be, you know, what are those the parameters in the back end?
Exactly.
Well, those issues you'll find on the front page. Well, the story is on page 3 of the paper this morning. Well, suspends all committee activities till after exercise. Remember, one of those, was it the Constitution Amendment? No, the Electoral Act Amendment Bill. When it was still in the Senate, the President of the Senate said at the time that some of them were on oversight functions, they weren't in the office. Yeah. But here, the House of Reps says all such activities suspended for the voting. Exactly. So everyone has to be there.
Absolutely.
That's the New Telegraph this morning.
Well, Daily Trust is next, and you see 2023, anxiety as Atiku Tinubu, other aspirants, no fate, June the 3rd. Will comply with timetable, APC, PDP, others. Initiative laudable, but, that's according to Dons, early start will help the process, CDD, and NAS Buhari's delays cause of frenzy, NNPP scribes. All of this is a build up to 2023. I'll just take this one. Nigerians to pay more for bread as Russia-Ukraine war rages. Imagine this has to do with wheat.
Slow down.
Maybe this has to do with wheat and then flour. I imagine, but more details should be on the inside pages.
Good.
And the sad one, 25 killed as ASUU attacks 4 villages in Borno. So we still have our own challenges right here. That's Daily Trust. Malcolm.
Vanguard has this one. 2023 opposition thickens as Jonathan weighs options. North deceiving ex-presidents, that's according to PDP source. He'll be a spoiler to South, that's from Oshuntokun. I'm not aware he's running, that's from Bode George. We can't replace failure with failure, attributed to Shetima. I want to know which Shetima is speaking inside the paper. It's his decision, Oladunjoy. That's Ogun APC spokesman. He has to cross the bridge. That's from Ondo APC spokesperson. APC zoning, no threat to PDP, says Bauchi governor. Choosing candidates by consensus, not democratic. That's from Buba Galadima. You find details on page 5 of the paper. So politics is the lead story. Motor insurance service loses 160 billion naira to fraudsters. Records moderate growth in premium. Only 28.3% of vehicles on the road have genuine insurance. That's from the NIA. Fake policy vendors operate from local government secretariats. That's from insurance brokers. And then you also see this bad fuel. Petrol scarcity persists in Abuja, Lagos, other areas, despite assurances. All of these are some of the main stories on the front page of the Vanguard newspaper. And in case you're interested, Justice Kayode was saying about constitutional amendment. Look at this. Immunity, life pension for Senate President, Speaker, deputies will be debated, says Rep. So these are some of the clauses up for consideration this week before it goes to the State Houses of Assembly. Page 6 of the paper. Of course, your Mr. and Mrs. is on the front page. But it's a Monday, so let's be serious a little today, shall we? No Mr. and Mrs. until maybe sometime later. Let's leave it there for the Vanguard.
Are you protesting?
No, I'm not saying it. You just meet us where we usually meet. And from the papers, we go to our issue for the day. We'll begin with our issue for the day after these messages. Stay with us.
At about midday, President Muhammadu Buhari arrives the council chamber after a 2-day official trip to Nasarawa State to append his signature on the reworked Electoral Act Amendment Bill, which is the first in 12 years after the 2010 Electoral Act. The President of the Senate, Mr. Ahmed Lawan, Speaker of the House of Representatives, Mr. Femi Gbajabiamila, Chairman of the Nigeria Governors Forum, Governor Kayode Fayemi of Ekiti State, the Chairman of the Inter-Party Advisory Council, Mr. Yabagi Sani, as well as other members of Cabinet were in attendance.
Chairman, Independent National Electoral Commission.
The President acknowledges an improved version of the bill, which he has held for the past 25 days since it was transmitted on January 31, 2022. However, he has some areas of concern.
The section provides as follows. No political appointee at any level shall be voting delegate or be voted for at the convention or congress of any political party for the purpose of the nomination of candidates for any election. This provision has introduced qualification and disqualification criteria that alter various the Constitution by way of importing blanket restriction, and disqualification to serving political office holders, of which they are constitutionally accorded protection.
That provision is a major objection raised by the president, which he believes infringes on the rights of political office holders. He wants the National Assembly to amend the section.
Arising from the foregoing, with particular regards to the benefits of the bill, industry, time, resources, and energy committed in its passage, I hereby assent to the bill and request the National Assembly to consider immediate amendments that will bring the bill in tune with constitutionality by way of deleting section 84, subsection 12 accordingly.
Appearing visibly elated, the president, flanked by the leadership of the National Assembly, finally appends his signature to the reworked 2021 Electoral Act Amendment Bill. Moments after the brief ceremony, the President of the Senate, as well as the Speaker of the House of Representatives, apparently went into a private meeting with the President in his office. The leadership of the National Assembly, in a chat with State House correspondents, assures that the legislature will consider the President's request for amendment.
I hope that they will send the request for the amendment in good time, because time is of essence. INEC is waiting, and because we don't want to spill over some of these dates unnecessarily, we will be expecting a communication from Mr. President with respect to this, and then the National Assembly in both chambers will look into the request for amendment.
Other participants at the brief ceremony expressed binary views of hope and possible pitfalls if enforcement is lacking.
I believe that the laws are there, but what is lacking is the enforcement of those laws. At the point of voting, we still have to come up with ways by which we can address the issue of use of money, obscene use of money, to influence voters. Otherwise, to be garbage in, garbage out.
Now that the reworked 2021 Electoral Act Amendment Bill has been signed, expectations have obviously soared, and a more reliable election conduct in the country is imminent. But apparently this law is not an end to all electoral challenges in the country. It is hoped that at least the law will address issues of manipulation and provide a level playing field for all political parties in the country. From the Presidential Villa, Gloria Umezuke, Channels Television News.
Well, that's what we're talking about this morning, the signing of the Electoral Act 2022. It's now a piece of legislation, but it looks like it would still be up for amendment no sooner than later. We have with us this morning Mr. Ezenwa Wagu, who is the chairman, Partners for Electoral Reform, convener, Say No Campaign Nigeria. Welcome to our studios this morning.
It's my pleasure. Good morning.
And joining us via satellite is Mr. Ahmed Raji, who is a senior advocate of Nigeria. Mr. Raji, welcome to the program.
Thank you and good morning.
Well, let me start with you, Mr. Wangu. I'm sure that, you were, I don't know if you were elated or I don't know what your feelings were, but I'd like to know how you felt on Friday, because as of last week, CSOs were planning a day of action. That's what they were planning. I think they had asked the president to sign, and it didn't seem like it was forthcoming. We did get wind. He was going to sign, was it on Tuesday or Wednesday, but much later it was moved to Friday. Eventually, we saw the signing, however, with one or two reservations. But how did you feel when he eventually put pen to paper?
Well, I think he helped to depopulate the strings of opposition that had trailed his not signing 5 times between 2018 and 2022. That casts a spell of someone who didn't want electoral integrity. And so with that signing, that put up that lead. And it creates excitement, cautious excitement. And the reason for that is because the political class in Nigeria are not truly yet in the conversation for free, fair, acceptable election.
You say there's cautious excitement.
Yes.
And you've given your reason that the political class are not seem inclined or in tune yet with free, fair elections. Am I getting that correct?
Yes.
But as I did ask on Friday, I said this Electoral Act has been a baby of many elections. It would seem that it's as a result of lessons learned from previous elections that we finally fashioned out this Electoral Act to try and cure some of the ills that we've seen in previous elections. So whether or not the political actors are in tune, shouldn't this be curing some of the malfeasance that we've seen before now?
Well, we brought the smart card reader. The smart card reader, we did indeed brag that it was a game changer. But we did saw that collusion, community collusion, official resistance to this process that I'm talking about, criminalized the smart card reader.
How do you mean?
At the end of the day, you find that people say, oh, it's not working, let's revert back to incident forms and all of those issues. It was that attitudinal issue that I'm trying to point to, that you may have good laws, you may technologize your elections, but if the attitude of the operators, the major stakeholders, the major election stakeholders, is not in tune, is not cultured to think in that direction, you may not get the outcome that you look for. Because at the end of the day, the amendments brought 10 core issues that, if truly implemented, will advance our process, the electoral process, in the right direction. And that's the excitement. That's why you are seeing. But if you are an enthusiast, if you are somebody that follows our process, you will see that majorly, most of the time, it is more of subversion, more of collusion than really the laws. Because this piece of legislation is the most amended piece of legislation that we have had. At every legislative foray that we have, there is a tinkering with those laws. But at the end of the day, the outcomes that we get does not match the expectations and the excitement that follow some of those changes. So my call really is that there needs to be much more advocacy around attitudes, around, for instance, the law is saying if there can be a review now, okay? If a returning officer makes a call through duress, there can be a review. That's huge. But if you then also make that cumbersome, in the sense that you don't get a quick review, then you may not get the kind of results. So I am more interested in that we have moved over this hurdle, but the bigger hurdle for us will be attitudinal, will be mindset change for actors, political actors, citizens, in a way that they understand that this has to be free, fair, acceptable at every point in time that we go into this process.
Well, let me come to Mr. Raji. Mr. Raji, this signing of the Electoral Act reminds me of the song, Now That We Have Love, What Are We Going to Do With It? Now that we have the Electoral Act, what should we be doing with it? INEC has decided what they're going to do with it. It brought out the timetable. It is in line with the newly signed Electoral Act, which is now Electoral Act 2022. But you also saw the reservations there given by the president. First, what are your thoughts on the new Electoral Act? And then I'll also ask you much later what your thoughts are on the reservations as well.
Well, thank you very much. I think, first and foremost, we need to commend the president for signing the bill into law, because despite the reservation that he had, or he still has, he signed it. That is a commendable action on his part. And also, we should commend the National Assembly for learning from the past errors and then beefing up the new Electoral Act, which has come up with some innovations or a kind of, for example, the use of smart card reader. It was not specifically provided for in the previous Electoral Act, but rather in the INEC guidelines. And the courts are of the opinion that for smart card reader to displace voters register for accreditation, there must be a specific provision in the law, and this they have done. And it has also made it very, very necessary and compulsory that without a card reader, there cannot be an election. And where a card reader is not deployed to a polling unit, or it does not function, then INEC must have to, within 24 hours, conduct another election with a card reader in that particular polling unit, except where the result of the unit will not have an impact on the ultimate result of the election of that constituency. So back to your question, I think it's a big improvement, but I agree with the previous speaker, but it is not just the letters of the law, but Nigerians must breathe life into the spirit of the law. Our attitude must be in tune with the law. The law may be good. If our mindset is not good, then we may not have the kind of result we are expecting. For example, Mr. President has raised reservation. We need to debate it, we need to look at it, and we all need to have an open mind as to what he has said. Is it in the interest of the Nigerians, or is it just to cater for the interest of a few people around him? Is that good for the system? So these are the issues that will be thrown up in due course. But in general, it is a welcome development, and I believe if it is faithfully implemented, if the spirit, both the spirit and the letter, although in law, you may know the letter, the spirit may be difficult to ascertain. But if you look at the mischief against which this law was enacted, it will be very easy to know the spirit. So we have to go by the spirit so as to check the errors of the past. This is my initial reaction to the law, for which I commend the National Assembly, especially the leadership under Dr. Lawan and Mr. Gbajabiamila. Thank you.
Well, Mr. Raji, if you can hear me, I wanted you to stick with that, your comments, your initial comments on that provision, that reservation that the president has. How significant, first of all, is the provision itself? And how significant is the president's reservation concerning that particular provision in Section 84, subsection 2 of the Electoral Act 2022?
Well, I have not got a clean copy of the law, but from the little I've read, what that provision is saying is that political appointees will not be allowed to be either delegates or aspirants during primary elections. Meaning that if you're a political appointee, you cannot go and vote to elect candidate either under direct primary or indirect primary. Or even consensus, you cannot take part. Or you yourself, you cannot be a candidate. You cannot be an aspirant. Question, who is a political appointee? I've searched through that law. I went to the definition section. There is nowhere the term political appointee has been defined. aspirant was defined, political party was defined, but no meaning ascribed to political appointee. But against the spirit of that law, the provisions, I want to assume that the political appointee will refer to people like ministers, chairmen of boards, special advisors, special assistants, all those who are participating in public affairs other than through election, or not other than through election and not by employment. Question: since the term has not been defined, will a career ambassador be caught by this provision? Will a vice chancellor appointed through whatever means he has been appointed be caught by this provision? Will a chief medical officer of a teaching hospital or medical center be affected by this provision? Because all these people, they emerge through a political process, but not through employment and not through election. So I believe the National Assembly will have done a better duty by defining the term political appointee. But be that as it may, Mr. President's reservation notwithstanding, the law is what it is. There are two schools of thought. And one school is, well, we should look at the rights of the political appointees and then allow them to participate freely. But does that law really prevent them from participating? All that law is saying is that if you want to step down, you can't be a political appointee and be taking part in all these processes. So, but others are saying, well, this is a justified provision in the sense that most of these political appointees, they use public money to influence their selection or appointment or what have you to become candidates, and they are not allowing level playing ground. And that most of them, especially ministers, they will do whatever to muzzle their way by using the auspices or their platforms. So in order to create a level playing field for all the aspirants, they are saying that everybody, you want to participate, if you are not elected, come out, resign your political appointment and come and take part, and not that you'll be using the office, you go there with a retinue of soldiers and military officers and what have you, because you're in an office. So I believe the provision, the mischief, the misdemeanor in the system, which that provision seeks to correct, we should look at it more, and then I will urge the National Assembly not to just flippantly accede to the request of Mr. President, to look at that provisions clinically, and if it's convinced by the original reasoning, he should stick to his gun and not buckle, because that provision is the law. And in any event, I believe a much more, since Mr. President has hinged it on being a violation of the constitutional provision, I would rather that individuals who are affected, they should go and test that provision before the court.
But Mr.
So
Raji,
that the court just give us an idea.
My apologies. Just to be clear, I mean, you've actually spoken to that. I would have thought that already. You already defined who a political appointee, is or is not.
That is just my guess. That is just my guess.
Yeah, I know. But just to be clear, this is what the law says. That provision that Mr. President raised issues with. No political appointee at any level shall be voting delegate or be voted for at the convention or congress of any political party for the purpose of the nomination of candidates for any election. And just as you pointed out, the president says it violates the Constitution. If you would hazard a guess, would that be a violation of their fundamental rights? Or what provision would you say maybe the president was hinting at?
Unfortunately, Mr. President did not mention any provision. But the right to occupy, that Constitution does not take away their right. It only gives a condition. It's a different thing if you say they cannot contest at all. It's not saying that. It's only saying a level playing ground in line with the directive principles of the state. Step aside. Do not use your office to muzzle the process. I think that is what that section is saying. But, and unfortunately, Mr. President has not pointed, he has not identified any specific provision that is likely to be violated or that has been violated. And who are these people? These are individuals. They are not complaining. If they are really interested and they want to really go and they are serious and they are committed and they don't want to abuse their offices, let them come out. After all, if you have been in a public office or a political appointee for 4 or 5 years, and then just 1 year more into the process of a new election, the law expects you to come and devote attention, not a divided attention. I believe the law is a good tonic for our system, but above all, my take is affected individuals or likely affected individuals should be encouraged to challenge the provisions. This is what we call a testable legal hypothesis. It is not yet tested. It's a new provision. Let them test it. It may even turn out that my own thinking or my own definition of political appointee is not the view the court will take. So we don't even know who are the political appointees under the law. Just a guess. I mean, my general reading is what I've just given you. It is not anywhere defined in that law who a political appointee is.
Right. So let me take this to Mr. Nwagu. In fact, the president actually mentioned some sections in that speech which he gave just before I sent into the bill, saying that, you know, that provision will subject those political appointees to inhibitions and restrictions mentioned in, I think, section 42 or thereabouts, 40 and 42 of the Constitution, of the 1999 Constitution. That's what he said. So he mentioned the sections. But Mr. Nwagu, so this has been, you know, on for a while. In fact, some thought it was going to be a deal breaker for the president signing this bill. I just want to see, from your own point of view, is this ultra-virus? I know it's meant to cure something, but referring to the 1999 Constitution, do you think it's ultra-virus? Do you agree with the senior advocate of Nigeria that this should be tested in court and not be given back to the National Assembly to amend?
Well, I think that whether it goes back to the National Assembly or not, those who are affected and do not think that they need to step aside to be able to contest for public office should quickly do that. They can go to court and even restrain the National Assembly from engaging with it until there's a judicial interpretation. But the truth of the matter is that, like you said, the misdemeanor that it's intending to cure is a sweeping one. It is one that even those who are elected should also be caught in that web, because at the end of the day, it's about the abuse of public office for personal gain. So whether the folks in the National Assembly and even governors and the rest of them who sit in public office and use their platforms for advantage should also be caught in that. So in some sense, if we want to cure any malady, then the best way to do that is to make it more sweeping than as restrictive as to a certain people. The appointers of these political appointees themselves are the more guilty of whatever that this law is supposed.
Okay, Mr. Nwagu, pardon me to come in right now.
I think
we're due for a break, but this conversation is quite interesting. It's classical. What may be right or what may be intended to cure an ill might not be constitutional or otherwise. But we'll go to break and come back to this issue and so much more, especially with the convention, APC convention, the Osun-Ekiti elections, how this will impact on them. So please stay with us. Welcome back. So it's official. The Presidential and National Assembly election will hold February 25th, 2023, and 2 weeks later we'll have the governorship and state assembly elections on March the 11th. So, you know, that song about now that we found love, what do we do about it? INEC knows what to do about this Electoral Act. So let's continue our conversation with Senior Advocate of Nigeria, Mr. Ahmed Raji, and Mr. Ezenwa Nwago, the Chairman Partners for Electoral Forum. Thank you, gentlemen, for your patience. Let me continue with Mr. Nwago. Before we went on that break, we were talking about, you know, the provision of the Constitution, what to do about it. But also bear in mind that in that same Electoral Act, Section 84, sub 3, talks about qualifications of aspirants and candidates, saying that a political party shall not impose nomination, qualification, or disqualification criteria, measures, and the rest, except as prescribed under Sections 65, 66, 106, 107, 131, 137, 177, and 187 of the Constitution. So, again, that is another reason that has been given to those, or by those who think that that provision in 84 sub 12 goes against the Constitution. That's for Mr. Nwago, by the way.
Well, I didn't get to hear the last part of your conversation, but what is important for me will be that, like the senior advocate said, those what are the intendment? What is the intendment of an amendment? The intendment is to cure a certain malady. And part of what we have seen is the obscene use of public office for personal gain and advantage. And that law is hoping that if you want to contest for public office, you should excuse yourself, and then so that can create some. So my worry, and I was sharing that with Maokwe, was the one who appoints is the one who gives advantage to the person that he appoints. So you've seen the use of private jets, you've seen the use of the security agencies in a manner that gives advantage to people who are in public office. That shouldn't happen. So if we're going to have a law, for me, that is as restrictive as we have seen, it has to be sweeping, and that's the point that I make. So the constitutionality of it has to be decided by the courts. The courts can weigh in on this and bring clarity to some of these issues. But as someone who has been observing election for a long time, I have seen very, very terrible use of public office to advantage those who are in it. And if there is a law that is saying before you can contest election, before you can become an aspirant, you need to take a leave so that all of the people who are in this contest can come to a level playing ground. I think that is desirable. That is something that we should work on. The National Assembly must take a contemplative look at that section 84 that has become vexed, and not just look at it from the point, because one of the problems that I have with our lawmaking is that, and I keep making that point, is that those who make law are always looking at themselves rather than looking at the overall public good that the law that they have passed will bring about. We should be a bit more wider in the way we look at the implications of all of it and bring a law that serves public interest and public good.
Let me take this to Mr. Raji now. I'd like to ask you what you make of the timetable. Do you think it is too tight? I mean, I've tried to study the notice of election. Some parts of it appear a bit technical, but I'm sure that if people take time to really look at it, perhaps they'll understand that sometimes it does appear that the dates are a little tight from where we currently stand. Do you think that from where you stand, do you think our political parties understand the import of these dates? And from the organizations you can see amongst the political parties, do you think that they are poised to meet these dates?
I think with commitment, they will. Because who are this political class? The very people who made these laws, they are the political class. And of course, they are aware of the timelines. They are aware of the burden it is going to place on them. And since the law has been signed, and gracious enough, INEC came out to roll out the new timetable, I do not see any problem. The whole thing will start, I think, around April. This is February, and then we have a whole month to get their acts together. And what is really before us right now is for them to bring out their candidates. And thank God, under Section 84, it can either be direct primary, indirect primaries, or consensus. So if direct primary will be cumbersome, they can go by consensus, or indirect primary through delegate system. So I really don't see any challenge, but I hope they will act in good time so that Nigerians will know those who are likely to be on the ballot, and they will begin to assess them, because it has given Nigerians enough time to study all the candidates and to make a choice before they actually go to the ballot. That is my take on that.
This Electoral Act has been a long time coming. I mean, since 2007, when we had those elections where President Umaru Musa Yar'Adua, who's late now, talked about how the elections needed to be corrected and, you know, empaneled the Justice Ways Commission to be able to look through it. You have been in court. I mean, I'm sure you've had to handle electoral cases, electoral matters in court. How fundamentally different, how big a shift is this Electoral Act 2022 from what we had before now, from coming all the way from 2007 to maybe 2010, and what we finally have now?
I put it to two major innovations there. One of our major obstacles is unfriendliness of our process with technology. And what do I mean by this? I mean the card reader or any technological device. Under the old law, the card reader was not able to prevail because accreditation through the register was there in Section 52 or thereabout. Now, under Section 47 or 48, it is now compulsory that card reader must be used. And card reader is such that it will reveal the number accredited. And this provision has now provided that where the number exceeds accreditation, that election cannot hold, or that return or result cannot hold. So the best way to test the accuracy of an accreditation, which will now assist in determining the number of votes that can be obtained from a particular polling unit, is card reader. So the new Electoral Act has now made it mandatory for card reader to be used. And where it does not function or it has any problem, INEC is enjoined to deploy another one within 24 hours so that the election there will be concluded, except where with the remaining results, the impact of the outstanding polling unit will not have anything. For example, if the margin is, say, 4,000, and the polling unit where the card reader has not been deployed, the entire voting strength there is just about 500, and the difference already is about 4,000 votes, that will not matter. Even if the loser on the current result gets all the 500 votes, the difference will just be about 3,500 again. So INEC can go ahead, and that is doctrine of substantial compliance. INEC will go ahead, and that is as far as that one is concerned. Then secondly, the new provision under Section 84.12 or 11 has now given jurisdiction to Federal High Court when it comes to pre-election matters on who is a candidate or who is not a candidate. For example, dispute as to who has rightly emerged, who has not rightly emerged, is he qualified or is he not qualified, all those kind of stuff, they can now only go to Federal High Court. Before, jurisdiction is shared with or between State High Court, FCT, and Federal High Court. And then INEC is now confronted with all kinds of orders from state courts, FCTI court, and then Federal High Court. Now, it is now only the Federal High Court, according to Section 8411, which I've just gone through. And the section also provides that no court, regardless of whatever complaint any aspirant may have, should make any order to stop any primary or general election. Because there is already an inbuilt penalty. If you do, for example, if you sponsor a political appointee,
those are all the things.
the penalty is that you will not have somebody on the ballot in respect of that constituency. So the court does not need to restrain the conduct of the primary or the conduct of the general election. So these, among others, are the major key innovations in the new Electoral Act, which, if faithfully implemented, will assist in giving us a credible election with the right mindset. With the right mindset. Very, very important. The right mindset. Because human beings who program the card reader, human beings who process the results from the card reader, if they are not so great people, I won't say they are bad, they can tamper with whatever they are bringing out of the card reader. So card reader alone itself
Mr. Nwagu did make reference to that, saying that a lot of the things that need to change, for him, the major thing that really needs to change is attitudes. Attitudinal change is extremely important. But I'd like to ask you, because much as we've talked about attitudinal change, part of what we're also hoping, and those who drafted and enacted this law are hoping, including the president who signed it, is that it will reduce acrimony amongst persons and political parties. I don't know how lawyers are going to take that, because it would seem that that's good business. But how do you really think that this will solve a lot of the cases which go to court, which perhaps ought not to go there?
Well, I lost you. I can't hear you. I can't hear you towards the end. Hello?
Do you really think that this will solve the problem of acrimony amongst persons and political parties?
Well, I do not think Electoral Act alone will be able to solve that. I think it's going to be a question of what kind of people and the mindset, and how easy is it to become very rich through public office. That is what is going to determine that. Because if you have a good electoral system, but there is a lot of abuse in the system, whereby the only thriving business is politics, the acrimony will continue. People will want to be there. And that is why, speaking for myself, I do not believe we have business with presidential system of government in this country. We need a moderate system of government like parliamentary, that will check the acrimony and will reduce all these expenses with elections and what have you. I.e., if it is parliamentary system, all this talk of political appointee not contesting or whatever will not be there. And then we can have the whole election in just 2 days, instead of all this huge amount of money being set out for primary, for these. You want, for example, you want to be a governor. And then, even though the law has set a limit on how much you can spend, but you can see that there's a loophole in that law. It says a gubernatorial candidate can only spend 1 billion, but individuals can give him 50 million. So he can have 1,000 people giving him 50 million, therefore monetizing the entire process. And where the electoral system is monetized, you cannot have a good result. So the acrimony is bound to be very intensive. And I do not think the Electoral Act, the function of acrimony is that of Electoral Act. It has to do with the system we're operating. And that is why we should move away from the presidential system and embrace parliamentary system in the interest of this country, so that we can have something moderate. For example, the National Assembly, they have reacted
Well, Mr.
By
Raji, if I
enacting-
may, let me quickly come to let me come to Mr. Wagu in the studio, if I may. Mr. Wagu, thankfully, a constitutional amendment process is going on. We do not know if they're going to be talking about the system of government that we currently have and whether we'll go to parliamentary system, but that is what the senior advocate is looking at. But let me come back to the Electoral Act. For a number of people, and I'm sure for maybe not just a number, maybe a lot of people, fundamentally what this Electoral Act was supposed to do, and including its amendment, is to put in more trust, is to ensure that we have an elections that people can trust. People know that their votes count. For those who are still skeptical, for those who are still saying that, you know, it's still not worth looking at Nigeria's electoral process and getting involved, what more needs to be done? How do we tell them that what we currently have now is really a shift coming all the way from 2007 where we were to 2022 where this new law has been signed?
Well, first, I have no sympathy for those who, for whatever reason, decide that they are not going to participate, because they are not participating is a vote in itself. For instance, if the citizens didn't rise up around this shift that you have seen in terms of passing the giving assent and the rest of it, there have been citizen action that have shifted the way we do things in our country. And if we all laid back and say, oh, it doesn't concern me, things are not going to work, we're not going to get the results that we're getting.
But there's still those who will say
I'm coming.
I'll let you land on that, but there's still those that will say we have no choice over who the political parties throw up. Now,
if you want to be part of those, you can't, if you are not where it's being shared, you can't say how was it shared. Okay, so if you want to know how it's done, if that is what you are interested in, you get into the political parties. Today we have a multi-party political system that allows you to vent your aspiration in different political parties. So except you want to be in the dominant ones, because of what we know, it happens there. But the point that I want to make is that we've had a shift. 2007, the man who won the election came and said, oh, this process is flawed. I need to do something about it. What was the worry? The worry was that you were going to vote and the result of where you are voting is already been announced. That's where we came from. And then we moved from there to the point where right now election has been taken away from INEC. You had a situation in which ballot papers were brought to politicians in their homes. Before election day, result sheets are stolen and shared. That's where we are. Today now we are coming to a point where you can transmit results from the polling unit in almost real time. And then you can then match it with a manual process, follow it up. So that's by, that authentication process in terms of first, even voter identity. The voter identity test. You have people who have multiple cards. They had 10 cards, different, Now you can't do that, okay? Because the process will find you out. You also have a process in which our voter register is being, through this authentication process, is being made to have integrity. So if you don't want to participate now, the laws are there that guarantees electoral integrity, that promotes trust in the process. So all that needs to happen is you ensuring that you come out and insist that what is in the law is done. For instance, if you have a law now that says an INEC official who contravenes his oath of office will be penalized. That was not there before. Okay, is now there, that if you get results through option AK-47, as we saw in some states, that right there, that the commission can review those. There are people who are sitting in the Senate who got their results through duress, and it is known publicly. But because the law says once a returning officer makes a call, okay, it is only the court that can. And so the politicians' attitude was, let us go to court. They do whatever they do. They stuff ballot box. They pour ink on the result sheets. and mutilate the process and say, look, go to court. Now that is not going to happen. The INEC has a vested power now through these new laws to be able to make a review of all of this. And that shows up citizen, confidence and trust in the electoral process. So those who don't take advantage now will not have any excuse. And that is important because the law by itself does not guarantee anything. The fact that you have a law does not guarantee anything. It is the ability of citizens to show that oversight on those laws that guarantees the kind of reforms that we're going to see. And those reforms will mean oversighting even the political parties, citizen oversight on the activities of the political parties. We cannot leave them and say, because at the end of the day, the leadership recruitment process that they engage in throws up the kind of candidates that we eventually vote for. So we can't stay aloof. They are, like the senior advocate was saying, if there are issues of timeline now, citizen groups and organizations must begin to put the pressure on political parties to first and foremost understand these guidelines. Because oftentimes, what I've seen is that there are people who contest election who don't even know the laws under which they are contesting election. There are people who speak about electoral process who have no idea what the rules and regulations that guide those processes are. So there needs to be mass education even for the political parties. There has to be training on these guidelines, on the new law, so that they themselves can take advantage. Citizens also need to understand it. So the reality for me is that, yes, we have a good law, or we have what looks like a good law now, but at the end of the day, citizen action is important. We need to also engage the judiciary, because at the end of the day, whether you have a law, it is they that have the interpretative power. If they say it is not this, like the senior advocate was saying, you now talk about spirit and letter. They are the ones who interpret the spirit and letter. So if they also are not properly educated, because these laws are not, they are not taught in the university. This new law will not be taught in the university when some of the people who are judges today became judges. They need to be schooled. They need to be trained on those new issues to understand it in a way that they can give, fair, honest, judgments around this issue. So we need to now do some advocacy. There's a new law, but the new move should be citizen advocacy around understanding this new law and how we can take advantage of it.
Let me flip to my colleagues in Lagos now. I know they have questions.
Well, thank you, Mark. Well, let me begin with Mr. Raji on this. So much to discuss as far as this new law is concerned, but there is a provision that, we probably are edging closer, if not already crossed the line of, and that is Section 3.3, which talks about the date of the election. The election funds due to the Commission for any general elections are to be released to the Commission not later than 1 year before the next general election. I know that 365 days make a year. And according to the INEC chairman, with the new provision, we have 363 days to the election as at the time that that announcement was made. What are the implications of this?
Well, I think the arithmetic of that provision, or may I say the spirit behind it, is to ensure that adequate planning is made and INEC is not placed in a precarious position where it will not be able to make necessary orders, because election is a process, not an event. And when you see it as a process, you need adequate planning. And if you have to release the money in the year of the election, it may rather be too late. But I think the federal government has been doing the needful, and the spirit of that law has been complied with substantially. Bulk of the money, according to the INEC chairman in one of his press interviews, they have been released. I think what is remaining is just the recurrent ones for softwares, but the major ones that will need time to produce, I think the federal government has substantially complied with that. But the old essence of the law is that if election is taking place in 2023, all the money, it may be February 2023, all the money for the election should be released latest by February 2022 for adequate planning. But for the purpose of this process, ongoing process, I think federal government has complied in principle with that law.
Well, speaking of timing, Mr. Raji, now the major political activities we have this year, we have the APC National Convention just next month in a few weeks, and we have the ASUU and Ekiti elections. What law will be guiding those activities? First, with the APC convention, they actually gave notice before the president signed the Electoral Act into law. So is it this Electoral Act 2022 that will guide the APC convention and the election in ASUU and Ekiti, or they'll revert to the one that was in operation when the announcement was given?
You see, all the activities that took place before the announcement of the law in line with the old law will remain valid. Subsequent activities will have to be in line with the new law. That is my understanding of what should be. You can't expect them to comply with a provision that has not come into being. It's not possible. And the law is not retrospective, it is prospective. As far as previous actions, what they did, i.e. asking for Congress to be held, giving out notice and what have you, they are valid in law because they were done under an existing legal regime. The new law takes effect from the date it was signed by the president, and it is only subsequent conduct or actions
just to clear the
provisions
air
of that law that will have to, yes.
Just to clear the air, I'm talking specifically about the APC convention now. If they're going to go consensus way, recall that the Act talks about how to go about consensus. That's the 2022 Act.
Yes.
So will they be relying on the 2022 Act or using the 2010 as amended?
The day they are doing the consensus, the 2010 Act has gone. It's in the dustbin of history. It is the new law which has been signed that will now have effect on the consensus arrangement. So they have to comply with the new law because the new law is already on. By the time they are having the convention or the primaries, it is the new law that is in place, so they have to comply. They cannot be seen to be complying with an old law. I don't know if that one answers your question.
Well,
Hello?
it certainly does. I want to believe that, you know, we'll be seeing the political parties complying more and more. As Mr. Nwagu said, perhaps they also will need to be educated that the 2010 Electoral Act, as amended, as you said, is now on the dustbin of history, and that what is in operation is the new Electoral Act 2022. On this note, I'd like to say thank you very much, Mr. Ahmed Raji. Thank you for joining us this morning. He's a senior advocate of Nigeria. And I also like to give our thanks to Mr. Nwagu, who is the chairman, partners for Electoral and convener Say No Campaign Nigeria. Thank you so much for coming on the program this morning. We'll take a break at this moment. When we come back, ASUU is still on its one-month strike, and NANS, as the National Association of Nigerian Students, is threatening a showdown if the federal government and ASUU do not reach an agreement and call off the strike. What's going to be ASUU's take on this? When we come back from this break, please stay with us.
We have agreed on UTAS now. We're going to do a joint test, both technical teams, and find the areas of reconciliation, because UTAS on its own is a homegrown system. And executive order, presidential order 3 and 5 encourages homegrown system, local content. So we should be able to encourage them. And that's what I told them. But they have this phobia, I can say suspicion, that government doesn't want anything other than eyepiece. And I kept on telling them, no matter what system you have, no matter what solution you have, it must have a handshake with eyepiece so that the government will know about their funds and their movement of the funds. So that is it. So many things, you know, countries go to war because of lack of information or misinformation. So I'm asking them to brief their people appropriately and then call off the strike before the expiration of the time they're talking about. So by Monday, we will have got back to them on some of the issues and invite them back for the discussion.
So that 1 month warning strike by ASUU is in its third week. So that means for, well, entering 3 weeks now, we've had students in public tertiary institutions in the country not going to class, not doing anything regarding their academics, I mean, officially whatsoever. It's a big conversation. We heard the Minister of Labor and Employment speaking about the negotiation with ASUU, UTAS, IPs, how they're meant to meet today. NANS, that's the Association of Nigerian Students, are meant to block, according to them, federal roads today. In fact, they said they will block the office of the Minister of Education and the Minister of Labor themselves. It's a lot, really, to grapple with. And as you have seen, we'll be having that conversation, that all-important conversation with Professor Emmanuel Osodeke, who is the president of ASUU. He joins us this morning via Zoom from Umuahia. Prof, it's good to have you on the program. So we heard the Minister of Labor saying by Monday they will have gotten back to ASUU regarding their own side of, the negotiation. What can you tell us about that first?
Thank you very much. Although we got a notice from him for a meeting on Tuesday. But as usual, what are they bringing back to us? If you recall, for the past 9 years or so, 13 years, they've been giving all these promises. But once the strike is over, they relapse. If you recall, we met with the Senate President and we agreed on this issue that we met with the Speaker of the House of Representatives in October. They also agreed on the way they are speaking now, the same way they spoke. We met with the NIREC, who also interviewed with the President, who set up a 3-man ministerial committee to interact with us. It's still the same issue. So our colleagues are tired of these promises which they don't fulfill. What we want is action. That's what we want. I had to talk about UTAS and what have you. Let me give you this. If Nigeria is proud of home growth solution, why would they accept foreign one without testing? And then the homegrown, the one by ASUU, that has come on at 80% in the test, and you say you should not apply. Why would they accept foreign one without test? And today you are seeing the effect. The report of the Auditor General of the see the effect of not testing that particular solution, IPs, and we are having a homegrown that all of us can work together and quickly apply to solve the problem of IPs, and we are still hearing stories. So that is it. We don't believe in ourselves. Any day this country believes in itself, we will solve all this problem. IPs were brought to Nigeria from nowhere, commercial, spending so much money, and creating so much havoc in the system. It was not tested. So those are the problems we have. Our members are tired of, we're not more interested in MOA, MOU agreement for this issue. We want action. Let them show what they have done.
UTAS conversation, which is a major one, by the way. But let's talk about what has happened since ASUU declared this warning strike. So we had the Minister of Education say that they were looking for ASUU at first, and then there was a meeting. And I'm sure you've had time to weigh and read the body language of government, the way government is approaching this. How would you describe that? Because I think it's important to also help Nigerians see, that roundtable, see what's happening exactly so we know what we expect. How would you describe the negotiations so far?
Exactly the same thing that we've been having in the past, 2009, 2020, 2017. Promises, beautiful promises. But once the strike is over, they are off it. They will not, that's it. That's our problem. If the system is following up with our agreement and advancing the timelines, nobody will be on strike.
But do you read any sense of urgency, Prof? Do you read any sense of urgency on the path of government on this one?
Not at all. Let me give you an example. We were supposed to start strike in November. NIREC, Nigerian Intermediate Council, intervened. And because we have so much respect for them, we shelved that strike and said they will intervene. And I must thank them and commend them because they did intervene. Met with the president on the 1st of February That is a month ago. And the president said, after all this, that the chief of staff, Minister of Labor, and Minister of Education should quickly handle this issue. You read it in the paper. You were also there. It's 1 month. Have they called up for one meeting? That three committee or three had they even called up to any meeting? So if the president gave a directive to solve important issues that is being mediated by NIREC, the head of all the two major religions in this country, and they have taken 1 month, 1st February to 28th February, and they have not even called up for one meeting. Does it show sign of seriousness? The president directive.
Well, certainly, the students seem to be showing some sign of seriousness with that mass action which they have promised today. Are you in support of, that action? Students blocking roads, even said they'll block the office of the Minister of Labor and the Minister of Education as well. Is this something that ASUU is supporting?
Well, ASUU as a union, every Nigerian has a right to fight for their right, for what is their right. Let me explain to you. Our Nigerian students be fairly treated. Are the university be fairly treated? You saw UNN hosted our shown on the media recently. Will these big men, in quote, allow their dogs to stay in those areas? You have a classroom that should take 50 students, you have 1,000. Should they be happy? And this is a country that all these people who are doing this, except one of you, have all their children outside this country, enjoy spending our money to train them. And here you don't put money into it. Let me give you an example. With what happened in Ukraine, a country that we really don't know much about, that we have almost 5,000 Nigerian students in Ukraine. Do you believe that? As we speak so, according to one of our traditional rulers, very respected, the Nigeria is giving more aid to America and that country that they are giving us, which is correct. Nigeria spend money train doctors here because doctors are not well treated when they start working. They move away to that country to go and treat other people. Nigerian lecturers move all over the world. And none is coming here because we are not teaching our system well. So when we start teaching the system well, remember that education is the key to development, that the only way to move forward is to properly fund our university. We will not have this problem. So, as far as I'm concerned, every Nigerian have a legitimate right to fight for their interests.
Well,
just like ASUU is also fighting for the interest of the Nigerian public universities.
Well, that interest, I guess, is one of those things that concern Nigerian students as well. One of them, the president, actually at some point said this, that at the end of every industrial action, ASUU members are paid their salaries and other entitlements, government officials get paid. It is only Nigerian students, according to him, that get nothing but a waste of everything. The house rent is non-refundable. The age count is irreversible. Is this something that worries ASUU as well?
Let me put it to you. Anybody say ASUU is paid after strike, it's telling a lie. We are paid for the work done. My university where I'm teaching, I started teaching there in 1995, 1994. We have not lost a single session. In all Nigerian university, we have not lost a single session. If for that union go on strike and something happens, it's past. But ASUU, you carry the work forward. I have not gone on leave in the past 20 years because my period of leave I have to put back to ensure that the students and the university do not lose a day. That is it. In a normal semester, it's about 15 weeks. 15 times 2 semesters is 30 weeks. The other 20 weeks, you are supposed to do the research and travel and go on your leave. But we sacrifice them. Because when we come back from strike, we have to put extra work. Cancel our leave to ensure that the student do not miss a year. I want to say categorically, in my university, since 1994 that I started teaching there, we have not missed one single session.
Well,
so it's not correct that ASUU are paid for not doing anything.
No, I think
so
the
it's
point
not correct
here,
now.
Prof,
Nigeria should stop that trajectory. Yes.
Well, the point here for the students is when the strike starts, I mean, recall the longest one we had in recent times for 9 months. I mean, a lot of students had paid for house rent. So, I mean, essentially, they couldn't use the house rent. I'm sure a lot of them had to renew. So that was money wasted. A lot of them, in terms of age now, they're much older. And during that period, they didn't quite achieve anything. They were just staying at home. So the point is, they lose a lot and they don't get that refund in some sense. It just goes and we keep having those strikes. And that's the question, is ASUU also wary of that reality for the students?
Let me answer that question. In the 70s, 80s, 60s, early 90s, were students staying off campus. Are those students staying in government hostel? To pay extra house rent? They are not. The question we're having is that if the students are well taken care of, they will not be talking about house rent because they will be staying in hostels. But today, government have abandoned hostels. So that is it. That's what the students should fight for. If all the students are saying government in the hostels, nobody will ask them to pay extra rent. That is the crisis you have in the system. When I was a student, I never stayed off campus. 70s, 80s, you didn't. Because at that time, the government had interest in education. So this idea of staying house rent and what have you, Nigerian government should build hostels in universities.
What about the age? What about the time lost?
Those who choose not to stay in hostel, hello?
Pardon me, what about the time lost? The fact that they're aging. A lot of them have opportunities that they want to catch up with. But because school is not happening, they can't even access some of those documents or meet up, with that qualification. They lose those opportunities. And these are stories that you hear time and again. So yes, about house rent, that can be sorted. But there are some other things that you can't catch up with or you can't, make up for. I don't think Prof can hear me. We'll try to reconnect with him because these are the main issues that students also raise. And hopefully when we get him back, we'll put in these questions. Also, I recall that the president of NANS, I think they had a meeting in Sokoto where he talked about this mass action, saying that, maybe strike is not the only way that ASUU can achieve these demands. And that's a question I'd love to put through to Prof as well. Can there be an alternative to this aside strike? Because, it looks like we've had so much strikes, but if anything, things have not quite changed. So how about we try something else? Is that a possibility?
Well, we also had this conversation with the president of NANS last week, and I was hoping that we'll be able to listen to a thing or two that he said as well. But, the concern here, one of the things that I remember mentioning, Comrade Ashefo mentioned last week is we also should be at the table. It's our lives being determined here. Perhaps some of those issues that we are raising now, the loss of resources, because those parents will have to still cough out another rent for these students, unless we're saying that the students should go start working. I don't know how, well, maybe that happens, but it's their prerequisite. It's their prerogative. It's their prerogative, not something that we should legalize for them. Absolutely. That's on the one hand. And then that issue of age, it is definitely of serious concern. I remember, Kawadi, in the 80s when ASUU went on strike willy-nilly. It was just like education just wasn't getting, attention. And so it is definitely worrying. For over the years, we've been talking about the same thing. And, the president of ASUU just mentioned now that so many students in Ukraine, about 5,000, 4,000 or 5,000, well, 4,000 according to the front page of one of the papers this morning. And last week we were hearing some figures around 12,000 and all of that. So calculate the number of students in various countries all over the world who prefer to go there to those countries to study. And pay premium, by the way. And pay premium. Not in Naira. Even as close to us as Ghana. The economy of the economic education economics economy from Nigeria to Ghana is quite significant. Yeah. So the fact that we are not giving attention to these things only begs one question. Is Nigeria, and I'm not just saying government now, I'm saying, is Nigeria interested in developing human capital? It's a question we need to ask ourselves. We are in a global village. Education, as we know it today, is one way to develop human capital. Is Nigeria, I don't know if Marco wants to weigh in on this before we get the president of ASUU back, if we are able to get him back. Is Nigeria interested in developing human capital? It's a question we need to decide. And then if the answer is yes, how should not be the issue. You raised the issue of whether or not we should be talking about strikes and are there other options? Maybe there are other options, but the question needs to be answered. Is Nigeria interested in developing its human capital for development?
You know, and I think this is a no-brainer, really, because we have talked about how we are cash-strapped as a nation, how we need to raise revenues.
And we export revenue.
Yeah, exactly. So we have those revenues we export in dollars, in pounds, and the other currencies. Now in cities, it will seem, for Ghana,
exactly,
in rands and all that. Imagine if we took all of that and then used it for our own education sector. That would be a revenue earner, absolutely. But let's hear from the students. That's the president of NANS, you know, speaking about this. And then we'll be back, hopefully reconnect with Professor Sodeke and then continue this conversation.
I've said, and I will always say, that, you know, when two elephants is fighting, the grass is always of height. ASUU said they are not shifting ground. What is the outcome of the federal government? The minister came out, he said, before the 1 month warning strike, that hopefully the ASUU will call off. That is what he said. So it doesn't have anything to do with our ultimatum, except if they are going to meet today again, or probably tomorrow or Friday. If we have not seen a concrete decision between the federal government and ASUU, or ASUU addressing a press conference, the way they did a week ago, that they are backing on a strike, and they did. If they fail to do that by Saturday, Sunday, no press release from ASUU that Nigerian students should go back to school, automatically we have no choice to back on what we have said earlier. So it's sacrosanct that Nigerian students were resolute to tell the government that it's high time they take our life serious.
Well, big question you posed there, Ayo, about whether or not Nigeria is interested in human capital development. I'd like you to separate, you know, Nigerians and Nigeria's leaders. You know, on the one hand, you have Nigeria's leaders acknowledging the role that human capital development plays and how it is important. But sometimes it would seem that all of that talk is lip service. Are Nigerians themselves interested in human capital development? You just gave the figures. 4,000 Nigerian students studying in different medical fields in Ukraine. And they don't even speak English there. I mean, you know what trouble it would take for you to learn another language and then get an education in it. If that is not being interested in developing yourself, I don't know what else is. So for a lot of Nigerians, they're certainly interested in human capital development. They're certainly interested in developing themselves. Parents are spending millions of naira in some instances to get their children to get the best education possible that they can afford. Yes, it is true that there are many other places where our children are not in school, where we have 10 million children at the last count out of school, basic education as it were. But those are the people who sometimes, maybe for one reason or another, do not have parents, or whose parents do not exactly understand the value of education, or who are unable to afford it. And that's where we go back to the state. So when we have our leaders talking about human capital development and saying that, you know, we need to get the future generation prepared for the future, you have to ask, how much service have we put in there? This education is on a concurrent list. It's for states and the federal government. So this is not a case of just federal government alone. For the governors who say they're interested in human capital development, we should ask them. I mean, maybe we should have a set of parameters. You know, have you ticked this box? Have you ticked this box? How many children do you have out of school in your state? And this is not just about states in the north. It will surprise you just how many children are out hawking on the streets or are being given out as helps when they ought to be in school. So there are many, many questions around this, and I think that we need to take a second look at this and look at the impact on the future of this country. Are we truly interested? We need to ask that, especially as the 2023 elections come up. If our leaders say they are, then we need to start ticking, we need to start getting parameters. How will you show that indeed when you leave office 4 years after, you know, the future generation would have been at least prepared 8 light years ahead of where they ought to be.
And I think that's very important because this government had those promises. And Professor Sodeke says, well, there isn't that sense of urgency on the side of government, and that's sad to hear. We're totally out of time. We're sorry that we're not able to connect with Professor Sodeke. Hopefully, we'll get him back to let us know what's going on and hear from the students as well, and more importantly, the government, which has been sort of AWOL on this. But that's our show for today. But before we go, let's take some feedback, shall we?
Well, yes, let's begin with Comrade Dario on education, who says education is the key to social development, which means it should be given due attention by any serious nation with desire to develop. In my opinion, our nation has continued to struggle in all aspects of economic development due to lack of capacity building.
Well, take a look at this one from INA says Electoral Act, on the Electoral Act, saying the National Orientation Agency, INEC, political parties and political actors should work together to mobilize Nigerians, especially those who are political, through aggressive voter education to bridge the gap of political apathy amongst the citizenry.
I also have one from Habila talking about the Electoral Act. The signing of the Electoral Act, or the Electoral Amendment Bill into law, is commendable. It will accelerate our journey to free and fair electoral process and give the electorate some sort of confidence against voter apathy. I hope politicians do not manipulate the act. And I'll take the last one from Festus Akimboyewa. He says the Electoral Act 2022 will modernize our election and increase turnout, especially if INEC conducts 2023 elections properly. But it's not right to disengage appointees of president and governors from participating in political activities while in office. Well, sometimes there's a difference between right and what is right and what is legal. That's the key question here, and we'll see how that is determined in the days to come. Thank you so much for watching this morning. I'm Malko Yusuf.
Well, my wish for you is that you get filled with that hassle today, really. I'm carried away.
Just to put it out there that we actually made attempts to get the position of government on the ASUU FG conversation, but we're hoping that the Minister of Labor and Employment would be able to get back to us in due time. That's Dr. Chris Ngige. Have a wonderful day, and God bless Nigeria. I'm Ayo Makinde.